Over the last few years, Kubernetes has become quite popular in terms of the container-based applications. When it comes to orchestrating container-based application, Kubernetes is gaining a lot of popularity and traction. There are many companies offering their own version of Kubernetes, and there is also the public or open source version of Kubernetes. With the adoption of Kubernetes, it makes very easy for application developers and even the operators to deploy microservices based applications which are running on containers on multiple VMs. We can define the specification for deploying an application as, let's say, a deployment manifest in which we can specify how many replicas we want to run, and behind the scenes Kubernetes will take care of running these application related replicas onto multiple different nodes. If a problem happens, it could be quite tricky to identify where the problem is coming from. We use higher level constructs like a deployment, which creates internally replica sets that can create or that will create a pod, which is the single unit of execution or smallest unit of execution in Kubernetes. And within a pod itself, we can have multiple containers running. Now, assume that there is a misconfiguration somewhere and you have to identify at which level of these different objects in the hierarchy of Kubernetes the problem comes from. In the last few months, ChatGPT has gained a lot of traction. Since OpenAI released the ChatGPT version, there are a lot of companies who are finding more and more use cases for using the large language models and creating solutions which will help people reduce the technical depth or reduce the effort required for identifying problems and proposing solutions using generative AI. It would be easier if we can use ChatGPT for identifying issues with Kubernetes related deployments or Kubernetes related workloads and even the overall Kubernetes cluster, and we can get recommendations in terms of how to fix those issues. Today's video is all about that. My name is Nilesh and we are going to see a very handy tool called as k8sGPT. K8 stands for Kubernetes, which is a short form of Kubernetes, and GPT is similar to ChatGPT, where we use a generative AI or AI based model to identify issues, problems with Kubernetes cluster and workloads and find solutions how to fix those very quickly. Let's get started. First of all, let's see what is the k8sGPT or why do we need k8sGPT. If we head over to the k8sGPT.ai, the homepage or the website, the definition of k8sGPT, it says that it's a tool for scanning the Kubernetes cluster, diagnosing and triaging issues in simple English. That is what makes it easier for layman people or people who are new to Kubernetes. Even the experienced site reliability engineers or SRE engineers and even DevOps or developers can use this to analyze different kinds of issues, different kinds of problems with the Kubernetes cluster, get the relevant information and use AI to enrich that information to provide easier solutions or recommendations. In terms of the different capabilities of the tool, it's mainly related to the workload health analysis. It looks at different data that we have in the Kubernetes cluster and gives us recommendations and suggestions based on that. It makes humans' life easier. It takes out the complexity of the whole Kubernetes environment and makes it easy to understand in a natural English-like language or English language. And it makes us get to this root cause of the issues faster and triage those issues using AI. So AI is used here to analyze the issues and to provide solutions or recommendations. The tool also has additional capabilities where it can scan for any vulnerabilities in the images using a scanner like Trivi, and it can give recommendations how to fix those vulnerabilities in the code. So let's switch over to the website or browser and quickly have a look at this k8sGPT.ai. So this is a CNCF project, and it's currently in the incubation phase, or it's in the sandbox phase, sorry. It is supporting all the versions of Kubernetes which are CNCF conformant Kubernetes cluster. So a CNCF conformant Kubernetes cluster up to N-2 releases is supported by k8sGPT, and it tries to codify the knowledge from the experienced site reliability engineers when they go about investigating the issues and how do they fix the issues. What are the prerequisites for getting this? The k8sGPT, it's a tool which can be installed on developer's laptop, and it can run as an operator inside a Kubernetes cluster. In this video, we are going to see how to use it as part of a local developer laptop or developer machine installation. It supports multiple versions or backends, and OpenAI is the default backend for this. We need to have the API keys to connect to OpenAI. In this case, we are going to use Azure OpenAI, which is a hosted service or a managed service provided by Microsoft Azure, and it provides some Azure tooling and Azure integrations on top of the OpenAI models. It also uses a large language model, and we are going to deploy a GPT 3.5 turbo based model. Any model which supports large language model LLM with the capability to interpret text and to recommend text or to generate text can be used here. There are different supported models as part of OpenAI. So one of the language based or text based model is what we need in this case, and we'll be using GPT 3.5 turbo model. And finally, we need to configure the backend, and this is what we will be doing as part of this particular video. So let's get started. First thing first, let's head over to the docs and see how do we get started with k8sGPT. We can go through the overview and all that, but I'm going to head over straight to the installation, and I'm running this on Mac OS. So I'm going to use Homebrew, and it's pretty simple to run the installation using the Homebrew package manager for Mac. We need to run this brew app k8sGPT-AI k8sGPT to register this particular tab or this particular package, and then we run brew install k8sGPT command to install that. Let me head over to Warp, which is the simulator for a terminal, and I can verify this. I've already run this particular commands in the interest of time. So I can say k8sGPT and then version to see which version of k8sGPT we are running. This is installed using Homebrew, and we are running 0.3.26 version, which was built on 14th of January 2024. So we have the latest version, or one of the recent version here available to us to start with this. Like any other terminal tool or like any other CLI based tool, we can use help to find out what are the capabilities of this tool. So if we say k8sGPT and then /help or -help, it will give us all the supported commands, and in the output here we can say that it's Kubernetes debugging powered by AI. We will see how it is really powered by AI, but in the meantime, the commands that it supports at the top level are analyze, auth, cache, completion, filters, generate, help, integration, serve, and version. Before we start using k8sGPT, we need to configure, or we need to authorize with the backend service which will be used for the AI prompts and for generating the AI based response. This is done using the auth provider or authentication provider, and we do this by k8sGPT. If we say auth, and let's first see what are the supported providers before we start using one. In the authentication providers list, we can see by default it supports the OpenAI, and then I have already added Azure OpenAI during my earlier testing. So these two are currently active, but along with this, there is also this option to include local AI, Cohere, Amazon Bedrock, Amazon SageMaker, Google, and Noop AI or Noop AI. I don't know exactly how this is pronounced, but these are the different providers, or these are the different backends which are supported by k8sGPT. And in this video, we are going to use the Azure OpenAI. Now, to use Azure OpenAI, if we go back to the prerequisites and see what is required, this is done using getting access to the Azure OpenAI service. To get access to the Azure OpenAI service, we need to request for the access. This particular page or this particular docs link on the Microsoft website talks about what is the current process to get access to this limited access. This is currently in preview, so the access is not available for every individual, and we need to request access for specific use cases. There is this registration process and there is a registration form to get access to this Azure OpenAI service. You need to provide all these details in terms of your first name, last name, which Azure subscription is going to be used for your use cases. And it will also ask additional details like the company address, company name, and various other details related to granting access to this particular Azure OpenAI service. And finally, it will also ask us to specify what are the different models that we want to use as part of Azure OpenAI. These are the supported models like GPT 3.5, GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo. There is the text to image model, which is the DALL-E 2 and DALL-E 3 versions are available. There is the Whisper models for speech to text, and there is also the Turbo with Vision. In my case, I requested for the first option, which is GPT 3.5, 3.5 Turbo and all, because that is what is sufficient for this particular k8sGPT use case that I'm going to demonstrate, or I'm demonstrating in this video. Once we have this form submitted, it will take a couple of days to get access to the Azure OpenAI service. Once we are granted the access, then we can go and create an instance of Azure OpenAI service. So we head over to the home page, or once we log into the portal.azure.com, if we go into the create resource option, here we can search in the filter for OpenAI, and in the list, we will see Azure OpenAI as one of the available service. Click on create and select Azure OpenAI. This will ask for typical information which is used or which is asked during creation of many of the other services, like what is the region where we are going to create this service, what is the resource group where we want to place this service, the network related information, tags, and additional details related to this. Now in the subscription, I'm going to use Microsoft Azure sponsorship subscription, and I also have the Visual Studio Enterprise, but during the request process, I requested access for this Microsoft Azure sponsorship subscription. So that is what I select here. I can create a new resource group, or I can use one of the existing one. So during my testing, I have created this resource group called as demo k8sGPT OpenAI RG. That is what I'm going to use. Then we need to select which region. And currently, if we look at this list, this service is available in only these regions. It's not available in all the regions where data centers exist for Microsoft Azure. We have Australia East. I don't find my usual region, which is Southeast Asia, for Singapore. So I will have to use one of the other regions to provision this Azure OpenAI service. I'm going to select Australia East in this case, and a little while later we will see that there is a different quota and there are different versions of these models deployed into different regions. So once I select Australia East, I need to provide a name for this service or the instance, and I'm going to say k8sGPT Australia, and let's say Azure Open AI. That is the name of the instance, and currently there is only standard S0 pricing tier. Next, we can select what is the network. I'm going to select the default option, but we can choose other options from the selected or available options there. If we want to specify any tags, we can specify it here. And finally, we can review and submit and create an instance of this Microsoft Azure OpenAI service. Once we click on create, it will take some time for provisioning this, and we can see on the screen that the deployment is in progress. Once the deployment is completed, we will see the resource available for us. Let's give it a minute or so, or let's give it some time for the resource to be provisioned. And here in the notification, we can see that the deployment has succeeded. We can go to the resource using this go to resource option. In the resource group, we can see this new resource added here, k8sGPT Australia Azure Open AI. If I click on this, it takes me to the control plane for that service, where I can look at the overview. I can get to know the details about the keys and the endpoints, the model deployment. I can configure all the other settings which are mostly common across multiple Azure services. Now we have the Azure OpenAI service instance created. The next step for us is to go and deploy that model into this particular instance. We can also see here what are the endpoints. So the endpoint for this is k8sGPT Australia Azure OpenAI, then openai.azure.com. And we also have the keys which will be required for connecting to this particular service when we programmatically access it, or when we want to use the API calls to call this particular service. If we go into the model deployment, this is where we can go on to the manage deployment option, and we will be taken away from the Azure portal, and it takes us to a separate portal, which is the openai.azure.com. This particular portal or this particular service is related to the Azure AI Studio, which is currently in preview. At some later point, I'm sure this would be integrated into the regular Microsoft Azure portal. But right now we have to work with this outside of the Azure portal. Here we can see the deployment option, and there is also other options available to select the models, the data files, quotas and all. Before I select a specific model for deployment, let's head over to the quotas and see how does this impact our service. Depending on the subscription and the region, we can see that the quotas are different for the different models. If we select GPT 35 or 3.5 turbo model, we can see that it is limited to 300 requests or 300,000 requests. Tokens per minute is the criteria or is the currency which is used in this case, and it will also show us if we have utilized any of these quotas, what is the remaining percentage of the request that we can make. So this is within the Australia East region. Same way, if I go to the East US, for example, we can see the model which is deployed is, or model which is available for deployment is different, and the quotas is also different based on the model that we select here. So I'm going with Australia East in this case, as we saw earlier when we created the service, and then I'm going to use this GPT 3.5 or 35 turbo as the pre-built model for deploying into that instance. So let's head over to deployments again and say create new deployment. Here it will again give us those options from the drop down, I will select GPT-35 Turbo. Model version, I can select whether it has to be auto updated to default, and we can see some information here in the info icon saying that this would be updated on 5th of July 2024, the 0301 model. And if you want to automatically update to the default new version, this is what will enable us to do that, or I can select a specific version. The last thing we need in the creation or deployment of this model is the deployment name, and I'm going to use this k8sGPT AU for Australia, Azure Open AI as the name. We cannot use special characters like hyphen or underscore in this. And finally, I'm going to click create, and here we can see that the deployment has taken place quite fast. We get a notification saying successfully created the deployment, and the deployment is also shown in the list of deployments here in this main screen. If I click on the name of the deployment, we can then get to see the details of what we chose at the time of creating this deployment, including the name, model, version, what is the version update frequency, what are the tokens per minute rate limit in terms of 1000. So we can see here it is 120 tokens per minute is the rate limit for this API, and tokens per minute is 120,000, and per minute we can send 720 tokens. Now it's time to use this particular deployment into our actual k8sGPT plugin or k8sGPT UI or command line tool. So in here, let's head over to the k8sGPT, and we need to add this authentication provider or the backend. In order to add the provider for the k8sGPT AI backend, we can head over to the backend's documentation, and in this web page we can see the different providers which are supported by k8sGPT. As of this recording, there are 8 different backends, and we are interested in Azure Open AI. So we can directly head over to the Azure Open AI documentation or Azure Open AI section, and upon scrolling here, we can see that we need to run this command to authenticate with Azure Open AI. In the bash, we need to add the k8sGPT auth, and we need to specify this backend, base URL, engine, and the model. So let's go and run this command. Starting with k8sGPT auth, then we do add, and here I have run this command previously, so I will just go to the history and use this command. Now the thing that needs to change in this case is the base URL. This we can get from our deployment or the service that we created. Engine is whatever is the value that we chose during the deployment. So if we look at this, the model name is GPT-35 Turbo. That is the one we are going to use here as the model, and engine is the name of the service. This is the name which is k8sGPT OpenAI. So let me go and copy these things and then update that particular command. So in the engine, I'm going to update this with the name of the deployment. Model is same, I haven't changed anything. Let's go and get this base URL from the Azure portal. So if we go back into Azure portal where we create the deployment, we would be able to get the URL from there. So I go back into the portal.azure.com, and it will ask me to log in because my session timed out here. Under the k8s Australia Azure OpenAI service, if I go and look at the endpoint, this is where it will give me this endpoint, the k8sGPT Australia Azure. I can just copy this directly to the clipboard, and I'm going to go and update this part here. So with this command, we are adding the backend as Azure Open AI with whatever are the services or whatever are the parameters that we need. Now it needs one of these keys, key 1 or key 2. One of them is sufficient for us to authorize here. I pasted it and added. Now it says the Azure OpenAI key provider with the same name already exists. So we can go and first remove that k8sGPT auth, and I can remove the backend. Instead of the OpenAI, I'm going to remove Azure OpenAI, which already exists from my previous testing, and now I'm going to add this new one which we created in the Australia East region. It's going to ask me for the key again, and since I have it in the clipboard, I've pasted the key, and here we can see that the Azure OpenAI has been added as the backend to our k8sGPT. Now if I run k8sGPT and auth and the list command, it will show us again that default is the OpenAI currently as the backend provider, and we have Azure OpenAI added in the active list of backend providers. If I want to change the default provider, I can say here k8sGPT default, or I think it is auth default, and then provider name as the Azure OpenAI. If I don't do this, then I need to supply the provider at every time I want to run this particular k8sGPT command. So now I can do k8sGPT, and then I can run the analyze command, and I can use the explain flag to explain what is the problem and what is the potential solution for that problem. So here we get the result on the screen with a couple of issues. One is the cube system extension operator matrix. This is having some label which it is expecting, and there is no service, there are no endpoints. And then in terms of the solution, it's giving us a solution to check the service configuration, verify that the endpoints are proper, and all these things, these are actually from the cube system. So I may not want to investigate this. Let's look at a problem, or let's look at issue which might exist in our own application. That is where I'm going to go and apply a couple of files here for my Tech Talks producer. I can say kubectl apply or k apply -r-f and dot, where I have the producer service and producer deployment in this particular directory. So if I do tree and I give level as 2, or we can see the producer deployment.yaml and producer service.yaml are the two files in this particular directory. So these two have been applied to my Kubernetes cluster, and now if I go back and run k8sGPT analyze explain again, we see that now we have a couple of other issues here. RabbitMQ producer service, which is my service or my application specific service, is having a problem. It says that service has no ready endpoints, and there are 3 expected pods, and all those 3 endpoints are not ready. It is asking me to check why this RabbitMQ producer, the pods are not working, and it's giving me much more detailed information. Here we can also see that the Nilesh Gule Tech Talks producer Java 1 image is showing back off. It is giving me a proper explanation, or the error saying that the Kubernetes pod is unable to pull this image and it is experiencing a back off. Without this, without having k8sGPT, the normal way for me to investigate this is probably going into something like Lens, or if you are familiar with the kubectl commands, then run the kubectl commands, look at deployments, look at pods. I prefer to use Lens, which gives me an overview of what are the workloads running in the Kubernetes cluster. And here, if I go into the pods, I can see that RabbitMQ producer deployment, which was triggered about 120 seconds ago. I see the similar error here in the screen. So we find the error is same what is shown in the k8sGPT. Now, instead of me going into the cluster and looking at this logs and looking at the information, k8sGPT is able to pull all this information and give me an explanation in English-like language to say probably you have a image pullback of error, and go figure out why the image is not being able to pull by the cluster or inside the Kubernetes cluster. This is happening because the tag that I'm using is having a problem here. I did this intentionally to show that it is very easy to inject an issue into the cluster, and k8sGPT can identify that issue. The actual image that I have published to Docker Hub is having a tag as Nilesh Gule Tech Talks Producer Java, not Java 1, which was a sort of typo there. Now, if I go back and run the kubectl command again, let's apply this once again, and the deployment has been configured again. We didn't change anything in the service, so the service remains unchanged. And now if I go back and run the same command, k8sGPT analyze explain, it's running the analysis, and shortly we should be able to see what is the change in the output. So let's scroll up in the output here, and we can see here, let's clear first so that we have a clear screen, and let's run analysis again. Okay, now we see in the output it is saying the RabbitMQ producer deployment has 3 replicas, but 4 are available. So this is a different error now, and it has gone and updated the deployment correctly. That means it is able to pull the images and it is able to deploy that or start that image. The problem here is something different, where it is failing because of the readiness probe failing inside the container now. And for this issue again, it is giving us a different solution. So it's asking us to restart the pod, fix the issue which is causing 500 status code. So this is a very handy thing, I feel, where I don't have to go look at what are the logs of my deployment, what are the logs of my pod. Very quickly, I'm able to analyze the complete cluster resources or cluster workload and identify potential problems with my Kubernetes cluster. The other thing that I can do with this analyze is, let's look at what are the different flags or what are the different options for analysis. If I do k8sGPT analyze and put the -h flag, we see that it supports this anonymization. This is required if we want to mask the sensitive data. If we want our objects like the labels and things which are used to identify our Kubernetes objects, if they contain any sensitive information, we can mask them before sending that information to k8sGPT, or before that information is sent to the backend, which is the Azure Open AI service in our case. We can also filter for things. Now, the filter things is a bit interesting thing. So k8sGPT, if I do analyze and or I think I can just do filters and list. These are the a list of filters which are provided. Currently, the active ones are pod, cron job, replica set, service, and whatever we see in the green. And the ones which are not used are the network policy, log, gateway class, gateway, HTTP route, horizontal pod, autoscaler, and pod disruption projects. So I can filter for specific type of object here. Instead of k8sGPT analyzing all the resources in the Kubernetes cluster, I can say filter only the pods. So let's try one of these option and say k8sGPT analyze and explain, and then in the filter we can say just filter the pod. Now one thing here is this seems to be case sensitive. When I gave pod as small earlier, it was failing, and now in the results we can see that only the pod related things are shown here. It will not show other options or other issues. So far so good. The other option with the analyze is we can make it interactive, where it allows us to have a conversation with the large language model. We can also say a specific namespace has to be filtered. Instead of filtering or instead of analyzing all the namespaces, we can filter for just the default namespace. So let's say k8sGPT analyze. Analyze and analyze, SE and ZE are alias. So you can see here in the aliases, we can use any one of them. That's not a problem. Then we can say explain, and we can also give the namespace as default. So now in the result, we see only the default namespace related findings are reported. It will not show things around the system, kube system namespace or any other namespace. So this way we can again limit the number of the tokens which are sent to Azure Open AI, and that way we can optimize the information that we get back in terms of the issues as well as the resolutions for those issues. Let's clear the screen, and the last thing I want to show with regards to the analyze here is the language option. Now the OpenAI model here is capable of supporting multiple languages, or the result that we get or the suggestions that we get as a potential solution can be translated into supported languages. Right now there are 11 languages supported, including English, which is the default one. We can use Spanish, French, German, Italian, and the other supported languages here. So let's try one of this option here and say -L, or if we are giving -, it is the language. We specify language as let's say I can understand a bit of French, so let's give French as the language. And here in the output, we can see that the error is still reported in English, but along with that, it is also giving a translated version in the French language. Now, I'm not a French expert, so I don't know if grammatically this is correct, but since this is based on the large language models and generative AI based solution, I assume that this is a correct version. So it's giving us the French translation of the error as well as the solution. Now let's go and change the error related deployment, or the deployment which is causing a problem, into the one where it works fine. I know that the Java version or the TechTalks producer with Java tag is having some issue, I will use the one which is a working version, which is Go. The Go flavor of TechTalks producer works perfectly fine. So let me go and update the image definition here, and let's go and apply this, where instead of Java, now we are going to refer to TechTalks producer Go version. And what I'm expecting is, when I apply the Go version, all those issues that were shown, they should not be appearing again. The Go version should work fine. So let's go analyze once again our default namespace, and I will remove the language as French option here. It is again going to analyze all those issues or analyze the workloads in my default namespace. And here we can see that there are no longer issues reported for producer. The producer is running all fine. I can verify this by running kget pods. And we can see that all the producer pod 3 replicas are running fine. They were created about 58 seconds ago. The issue we are seeing is reported for TechTalks consumer, which has been there even before we started this deployment. So with regards to the producer, everything is fine. And if we have the proper version of the producer running, we don't see those issues any longer. Let's go back to the slides and see what did we achieve so far. So we looked at deploying the large language model into the Azure Open AI Studio, or using the Azure AI Studio into the Azure Open AI instance that we created. And finally, we also created the k8sGPT backend, using which we were able to interact with the Azure Open AI service and use k8sGPT to analyze our Kubernetes cluster. We can run some of these commands like k8s auth list, and we looked at how to analyze the workload using the analyze command and explain the results or explain the output of that command. Now, in summary, what did we do so far? In this whole exercise, we started with installing the k8sGPT using Homebrew, and then we used Azure Open AI, which is currently in the public preview. We need to request the access for this using the request form, and once the access is granted, we went and created the instance of this. The thing to note about the Azure Open AI service is currently it's not available in all the regions of Microsoft Azure. So we will have to select one of the region where it is supported currently, and probably the one which is nearest to our area of work or where we are currently residing. It supports different versions of the models in the different regions, and looking at the quotas, we also identified that in every region, the version of the language model which is supported could be different, and also the quota for that particular version could be different. So we need to select the right region where it has the right quota for the service or the version of the model that we want to use. And then we use the k8sGPT to analyze the potential problems, and we also looked at the recommendations that are provided. This also gave us the filters for the scanners and the resource type that we want to scan. So we were able to look at some of those filters or different options. And in terms of the language support, there are 11 different languages which are supported, where we can do the translation of those reports which are given. That was all about using k8sGPT, which is the AI based workload analyzer for the Kubernetes cluster. It uses AI. It works very well by looking at the known errors and providing us a solution in very friendly English, or the language that we choose. So I personally found this very useful if you have worked on Kubernetes, and if you come from, let's say, development background or DevOps or SRE. you know that it can be very tricky. It can be very difficult to identify problems when they happen in Kubernetes. It's very easy to get started, in my opinion, with creating deployments and services, ingress and all. But when you start scaling, when you start doing things which are complex, and when issues come at that point in time, it could take quite a long time to get to the root cause of that issue. I think so far what we have seen is k8sGPT is doing quite a handy job to analyze the workload on the cluster and give us a quick summary of what are the problems it sees at this point in time. And if it knows what is the probable solution, it will also recommend us for that solution. So as we add more type of resources and more kind of workloads into this k8sGPT, I think it is going to get even better. I hope you found this video useful. In case you know something like this which works in a similar situation, I would love to know about it. Please do let me know in the comment section. Also, if you want me to create a particular type of video on this channel, do let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching this video. If you found this useful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. You can also hit the bell button to get notification when the new videos are published. Thanks once again for watching this. Until next time, code with passion and strive for excellence.